Okay, so welcome everyone. You are here at Copyright and Creativity's Mentoring Educators Through the Copyright Maze. My name is Dana Greenspan, and with me today are some awesome educators that I'm going to have introduced in a moment. But this presentation is a little bit different than what we typically do. We do have some copyright basics included in this presentation, but we're going to whiz right through those and reference where you can find those in our other presentations. But this one is really geared for you as a mentor, or you may not be an official mentor, but that may be kind of the ad hoc role that you've taken in your district, where people come to you as the copyright expert and have lots of copyright questions. So we're going to hopefully answer a lot of those today and give you additional resources other than just our teaching resources. So once again, my name is Dana Greenspan. I'm a retired educator. I have 24 years in education, and I've been retired, it's gone on 7 years now. And I was with the Ventura County Office of Education, and that's similar to a RESA or a BOSA in other parts of the country, both a school district with special ed and court and community students, and then a support agency. And we supported about 140,000 students in Ventura County, which is just northwest of Los Angeles. And our smallest school district was 56, where the superintendent principal also taught kindergarten up to over 20,000. So we did see the range in district sizes. So again, with me today, I have Brittany Fleming, Julie Jameson, and Jen Roth, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. So Julie, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Julie Jameson. I am a high school librarian in a suburban school district about a half hour outside of St. Louis, Missouri. I also serve as a K through 12 curriculum coordinator in my school district, in a fairly large school district. And I've been an ambassador with Copyright and Creativity for, I don't know, about 5 years now. So I'm happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you, Julie. Welcome. And Brittany, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm Brittany Fleming. I am an elementary librarian in Northwest Arkansas. I'm also an adjunct professor for a university here in Arkansas for their graduate program for librarians and instructional technology, where I teach copyright and intellectual property. I think I've also been an ambassador for about 5 years. Does that sound about right? I think
Yeah,
so.
It sounds, yeah. It's going on, yeah, it's been quite a while now. So yeah.
Excited to be here as well.
Thank you. And Jen, are you on the call?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen Roth. I'm an elementary librarian in North Penn School District in Pennsylvania. I'm about 40 minutes from Philadelphia, and I teach students K through 6. This year, I was awarded the 2025 PSLA Innovator of the Year Award, which was really exciting opportunity and news for myself. And yeah, thank you for coming today. And this is also my 5th year as an ambassador.
Great, so welcome. And as you'll discover throughout the presentation, these gals are very knowledgeable and awesome educators and great resources. So you can always join us for office hours and kind of pick their brains if you'd like to. So, yeah, so this is kind of an interesting graphic. It's, showing all the different components of copyright, and including copyright infringement, and how easy it is to get kind of lost in that shuffle. So really understanding copyright is really a basic life skill and a key element of digital literacy. And everyone acts and creates media, and everyone's a publisher now. And even with AI coming into play, I think understanding copyright and being able to apply it well, legally and ethically, has become even more critical. And so we found over the last 5-6 years that base knowledge is really low, and that copyright used to be an esoteric subject for lawyers and big publishers, but really is something that everybody needs to know. So, and again, you in your district role, school site role, may have be either formally or are the mentor and kind of the key go-to person regarding copyright and fair use for your district, or you may just be the de facto person that your colleagues rely on because of your level of expertise. And I just want to add this disclaimer that we're not lawyers, and so nothing that we say should be construed as legal advice. And so, yeah, so again, we'll do the best we can to answer your questions. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We'll try and answer those. Most of them will be answered during the presentation, but we'll try and answer additional questions as we go along. But just know that we can't give legal advice. And so some of our questions, what we like to do is give you the resources and so that you're able to, and the knowledge so that you're able to make those decisions on your own. So just a little bit about CNC, in case you're not familiar with copyright and creativity. All of our resources are free. We have a plethora of resources, lesson plans, slides, videos, a PD course. And we just launched our escape rooms for grades K through 12. And so if you weren't able to join us in that presentation, we'll show you on our website where our presentations are housed. But yeah, feel free to take a look at those. And as I said, jump on office hours if you see fit. And just again, these materials were originally developed by I Keep Safe, which was a nonprofit. And when they changed their business model, we knew we needed to find a new nonprofit home for our resources because they were just too good. And so our new parent is Internet Education Foundation. And again, everything's licensed through Creative Commons, so you can use our resources in part or in whole. We just do ask that you provide attribution to both I Keep Safe and the Internet Education Foundation. So today we're going to explore a little bit about what copyright is, why it's important, give you some real world examples. And I think that's one of the things that we do a lot, share a lot in this presentation is providing you with those examples that may have maybe questions that were posed to you by your colleagues, but really to have key understanding so that we take you out of the role of copyright police. And I think that that's too easily a role that we find ourselves in. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation over to, one more. Why copyright's important. So again, both the AASL library standards and state standards identify copyright and fair use as an essential 21st century skill. And our goal is really to make concepts clear and accessible to students and provide them with the knowledge and skills so they'll be successful in today's digital world. And so it's really important for educators to have a strong understanding of copyright so that they feel more comfortable in teaching and being also ethical users and positive role models. I know when I started teaching digital citizenship, I really avoided copyright and fair use and hoped nobody would ask me a question because I really was not clear on all the ins and outs. And after if you have teachers that feel the same way, if they go through either our online course or come to one of our presentations or listen to one of our recordings, they'll really understand understand copyright much better and be much more confident in teaching it. And it's also important to know that there can be financial consequences for copyright infringement. There was a school district in Texas that was fined $9 million. And basically the district became aware of the infringement, but wasn't unable or turned a blind eye to stopping the infringement. And so they were fined $9 million and it had to do with consumables. So really understanding and being an ethical user is not only morally the right thing to do, but also can be costly to your school district. So we've got lots of graphics on there. Okay, so just so you know, as we get started, the following slides, we have covered them the part that Julie's going to first cover in previous webinars where we focus on using our resources. And so I've linked the webinar recordings. But also we'll show you when we get to our website where you can find those. And once again, if you're just joining in, here's our bit.ly CC Mentor 25 for access to the slides. Okay, now I'm turning it over to Julie.
Okay, so again, like Dana said, I'm just going to power through a few of these introductory slides just to review the basics. Remember, this presentation is really geared towards helping our teachers and staff members understand copyright. So this is just a quick little review for us. All right, so we know that the beginning of copyright rights started all the way back with the Constitution in the United States. So again, it's all about promoting the progress of science and useful arts. In other words, it's a really good thing, and that's one thing we want to make sure we reiterate to students and adults that we work with as well. Next slide. So what does copyright cover? Anything you see right here. So it's any original creative work that's set down in a fixed form. If it's written, recorded, or digitally saved, you are automatically have a copyright over that work. And that's always an aha moment for students when we do it, but something that a lot of adults may not realize either. So any of those things in a fixed form, even if you doodled on a sticky note, it's written down, so that would be considered covered by copyright law. Next slide. When you make an original work, you get to decide, you have a lot of power, a lot of choice. You get to decide who can make copies, make derivatives. So for example, when making a movie from a book, distributing copies, or displaying or performing the work in public. So how the work is displayed, how it gets publicly performed or digitally performed sound recordings. Of course, there are limitations to copyright. Some things there are no copyright at all. For example, factual information, government documents like NASA photos, those kinds of things are not covered by copyright. Also, fair use. So that is a Supreme Court law that says to avoid rigid application of the copyright statute when on occasion it would stifle the very creativity which that law is designed to foster. We'll dig in a little deeper on this, but that is when you can use something without permission if you do a fair use analysis and weigh 4 factors that we'll go into a little more depth in just a little bit. And then eventually copyright does expire. So that little graphic is a really good way to explain it. So after 95 years, it automatically goes into the public domain. There was a little bit of stretch of time there that you can see before 1978, where it was dependent upon whether or not the copyright holder or took steps to protect their work. But after 1978, everything is automatic. You're automatically covered. Okay, limitations for fair use. So here are some of the things: the fair use of a copyrighted work for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, or research would not be considered an infringement of copyright. The word teaching there is highlighted because I think sometimes there are teachers that think that if I'm using it in the capacity of my job in any way, then I'm automatically covered under this. And that is not necessarily always the case. So we just want to be aware of that as well. Okay, using copyrighted works in teaching. I think this is going to Brittany.
Yes, it is. I'm going to talk a little bit about copyright when it comes to teaching. So Dana, if you'll go to the next slide. So these 3 things are important when it comes to copyrighted works in our classroom. Let's start with the license and subscription. So a license, your district may have a subscription service that makes certain copyrighted resources available to use. That's one thing that you need to make sure you check with, whether it's your librarian, someone in your office, to make sure that you know if you have that or not. Sometimes we talk about that when it comes with movies, showing movies, which I'll get to in a little bit, but also with your textbooks. That way, you know how to access those materials. We don't want to assume anything. Also, you need to make sure the license to see if they're limited to educational use or only for teaching purposes. An example of that could be a database, whereas you have some restrictions when it comes to the consumables that go with the database. The licenses aren't unlimited, so don't assume that you have free reign for anything. Also with photocopying materials for your class or grade level, you want to make sure you check the copyright of the original source. Sometimes these things that we photocopy are considered consumables, and consumables you have to more than likely have a subscription for. So we want to make sure, or you want to make sure, that your district has a subscription to be able to continue to copy those. Some things, were allowed during the pandemic that aren't allowed any longer. So that's something that we also want to make sure you check. That's something that you can also look on our website. We have a section which we'll look at the website later, but there's a tips for distance learning section that kind of gets a little bit more into it, but just make sure that you're aware that those licenses subscriptions, you don't just have free reign, and it doesn't all, you're not allowed just to do whatever you want with those. Let's look at OERs. So OERs are open educational resources, and that's learning and teaching resources that are credited and licensed to be used for free, which is fantastic. And we actually have it linked in our slides. You can search subject matter, grade level, all of those resources. So please check that out. That's something that you can use with your class. And since we have it linked on here, let's talk about linking for a second. So instead of posting content directly to your learning management system or even in an assignment, you can link to a source instead versus copying. So if you're really worried about the copyright source, whether it's a license or if you are allowed to be able to copy something, you can always link it instead. By linking, you're not creating that new copy. Be careful not to link to a site that does have infringing content. Make sure it is an upstanding site. So that's the only downside to linking, though, is you do not have control over the website. So you might want to revisit that link to make sure your link is still active. Sometimes that happens where the link is broken. You want to go back and make sure you fix it. Now, if none of these three things work for you in your classroom, that's where fair use comes into play. So Dana, if you'll go to the next slide for me. So there is something called the specific exception for in-class instruction. You've got your face-to-face instruction, nonprofit, if you're a nonprofit educational institution, and the copy that you're using, you actually obtained lawfully. This is something that helps us in classes. However, one of the things that we do have to understand is this is talking about performing or displaying a copyrighted work in the classroom. This isn't talking about making or distributing copies. So that's something that you want to think about when you're looking at making and distributing copies, that face-to-face, just because you're in a classroom with your students, doesn't automatically allow you to make copies. So let's go to the next one so we can find out how to make those copies legally. All right, so let's talk about fair use. So Julie mentioned earlier that fair use was a 4-factor test. And the great thing about fair use is it does help us in education. When you are looking at fair use in your classroom, you do actually need to consider all 4 factors when you're deciding if that copyrighted work can be used. This is without permission of the creator. So if you're not going to ask that creator permission to use their work, this is where you want to use the 4-factor test. Okay. And again, we're not giving you legal advice, but we do want you to be aware of the fair use law, because just because we're teachers doesn't mean we get to use whatever because we're teachers. So let's look at the 4 factors. Dana, do you mind? Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay, so depending on the age of your students, you might just want to introduce this. In elementary, you probably aren't going to go deep into the four-factor test, but with other teachers, this is something that you want to make them aware of. You have the first factor is called purpose and character of your use. So why exactly are you using whatever you're wanting to use with your class? You go to the next one.
Not showing up.
No, huh? Oh, there it goes. Yes.
Oh.
Sorry. Then you have the nature of the original. So that is how creative is that piece? The next one is the amount and substance. So how much exactly are you going to use? And then the last one is the effect on the market. I know I'm a K-4 elementary librarian, but I do talk to my fourth graders about the four-factor test, and I do talk to them about the effect on the market one because they really understand that. They understand that if you're keeping someone from making money or hurting their livelihood, they kind of get that. So we actually do go over a little bit of fair use with them because our students understand copyright a lot more than what we think they do. But make sure you do tell your students or staff that all four of these factors have to go together. All right, next slide. All right, one of the things that we also talk about with fair use is this Cornell example. So it's a checklist for fair use. This allows you to document anything that you have gone through. If you are going to use something and you walk yourself through those four-factor tests, you can document it on this Cornell that's linked here, the check sheet, and you can go through and make sure that you have gone through those factors, but you're mainly doing it so that you're documenting that your fair use was done in good faith. It's just a good habit to get into. That way you can, if anyone ever asks you about having permission to copy that, you can say, well, I didn't need permission because I've walked myself through these four-factor tests, and here is my rationale for doing it. All right, so this is a video that we have on some of our curriculum. It's a really good video. We're not going to watch it right now, but even though these videos are made for students, they're great to share with your colleagues as well. Okay, so the next part of using copyrighted works in teaching is public domain, Creative Commons, or district subscriptions. So we have public domain. In the United States, you've got, we know that copyright expires. So with that, whenever it expires, it falls into the public domain. So what's great about that is you've got you have access to things that students are allowed to use because they're no longer covered under copyright. So this is something great for staff and students to be able to use. This is another way that you can link to several different things to be able to allow them access to copyrighted or no longer copyrighted works. However, we do have to remember that these public domain ones, when they've fallen out of copyright, they are older works. So just be mindful of that as well. Creative Commons. Creative Commons is a licensing system where creators give advance permission for others to use and reuse their work for free. This is a huge body of work that's available. Creative Commons license may allow reuse without restrictions, or it could have some conditions like requiring attribution or maybe permitting non-commercial use only. So you do have to check the license. But this is another fantastic source to use in your classroom or with your students. Will you go to the next slide? This is what the license look like. Something to get in the habit of. It actually came up in a professional development I was doing a few years ago, where several of the members in the audience were like, we should probably start putting license on our work. So, because that's something that you can do with your students, you can teach your students to go through and look at the different license and put on their own stuff. So it's just a good habit to get into, but it's also really helpful when you're using others' work. That way you know how to read those license and how you're able to use them, because it does go from least restrictive to most restrictive. And again, this is another video. It's a great one too, that goes a little bit more in depth of public domain and Creative Commons.
Oh. Didn't mean to play that.
And I think I'm turning it over to Jen.
Yes, thank you. We have three definitions. Copyright, as set in the Constitution, it's the exclusive legal right to reproduce, publish, sell, or distribute the matter and form of something. And then there is terms of service, the rules that govern a user's use of a service or platform. Licensing, the granting of permission by a copyright holder to use, copy, or distribute their copyrighted content in a certain way. A copyright holder can choose grant licenses to individual users or specify types of uses that he or she will allow anyone to engage in. And we're going to look at some of those examples today. So the next slide is the educational screenings of documentaries on Netflix. There is a term of service when you sign up to that you are limiting it to personal and non-commercial use, which means in your home. So using your Netflix account to show a movie to your class might be a violation of your contract with Netflix. Netflix could, in theory, try to take action against you, like canceling your subscription. Again, there are specific teaching exceptions allowing, displaying, or performing the copyright materials, but we have to make sure that those requirements are being met. I do know that Netflix does have very specific terms of use for showing the documentaries. It has to be within a certain amount of time. You can only show certain documentaries, and there is a link that gives you the full documentaries that you are allowed to show from their platform. And so again, that would be an example of the terms of service. That also goes along with any other streaming platforms that you may utilize at home or in your classrooms or for educational purposes. The licensing example, this one is a big one in my school district. I know that a lot of teachers get really excited. They find something amazing on Teacher Pay Teacher, and they want to share it with everyone. However, you definitely want to be careful to doing that. And it's just because their terms of service, the licensing is that when you purchase something on Teacher Pay Teacher, it usually has a license for just you in your classroom only. And even when they're being shared, I do sometimes see of like, oh, this is for your classroom use only. Please do not share. And then it gives examples of the way to share. And we end up seeing those things being shared in that way. So again, if you want more than one license to share with others, then you would need to make sure that you are purchasing those licenses. So if it only has one license, then it is just for you and your students in your classroom. The next one is using media. As you begin any project that will involve using others' creative work, you can have a conversation. So again, often when we're doing a project for school, we want to use images, graphics, songs, other copyrighted work in our assignments. We just want everyone to understand what's legal so you could feel confident as you explore your own creativity, make new creations. Again, our students are digital creators. We're also digital consumers. So they are creating reports, essay, presentation, music, movies, photos. So here are a few guidelines. If we're using a copyrighted work for an educational project, it's almost always allowed as long as the work isn't getting distributed beyond the classroom. So here's one or two examples. One of them would be a picture and graphics for a book report to show the cover of the book, images of the city or country of the book setting, or the artist's renditions of the book or characters. Another example would be video clips to help you teach an important concept. So not showing the entire video, but maybe pieces of that video or movie that you would like to share so that they can understand the concept of it. And remember, we still have to be citing our sources and helping our students navigate that as well. We also have the Google usage rights search. If you haven't seen this before, this is really neat. I really love that our school district automatically has our students' image searches already done, like filtered to the Creative Commons licenses. They do have the option to turn it off, but right from the beginning, they are only getting the Creative Commons licenses. And so the steps are there. You're searching for, in this example, you're searching for flowers, you're clicking on images, you're going to go ahead and click on tools, and then it's usually defaulted to all at this point when you're Googling, and then you can go ahead and click on Creative Commons licenses. There are different Creative Commons licenses that Brittany talked about a little bit earlier. And so you just want to make sure that even though those images are under Creative Commons, that you are still following the way that the creator would like you to use it. Some of the photo options that I use on my website for my students to access are, as you can see, Pics for Learning on Splash Photos. I don't just give them this list though. What I like to do is I give them the list with exactly what you see here. So it says Pics for Learning is a curated image library that is safe and free for education. Teachers and students can use the copyright-friendly photos and illustrations for classroom projects, websites, videos, portfolios, or any other projects in an educational setting. So I ask my students, okay, so if you wanted to do maybe mowing grass this summer or a lawn business or dog sitting, what would would you be able to use this? And they think about it and they're like, no. And I said, that's right, because it does say Pics for Learning is an image library that is safe and free for education, and it is used for projects in an educational setting. And so, again, that would be more commercial because you're making a profit and it's outside the four walls of the classroom. And so I go through each of them and explain to them, how they can utilize or not utilize each of these options. And again, it just gives them an idea for them to kind of think about, okay, if I want an image for my next class project, I can use Google Images as long as I'm looking for Creative Commons ones, but then also giving them an opportunity to look at other educational pictures that they can use. I do know that some school districts do block or filter some of these, so they might not all work for you, but I'm hoping that you can at least get one or two so that you can share with your students. Then we move on to read alouds, publishers of children's books on YouTube. This has been a really big topic that people have been discussing and talking about. Can teachers read books out loud online? EdSurge has a really great example, which we wanted to share with you today. But don't get fooled. It does make it seem like, yes, I can read anything I want and post it online. So go ahead and read that article. I really do encourage you. It's going to give you an idea of when it's okay to do a read aloud and when it's not okay to do a read aloud. There are publishers of children books on YouTube who are giving permission of, yes, you can go ahead and show this video with the class because it is not against copyright, and you are more than welcome to read the book out loud. I do know that during COVID, there was a lot more publishers. I do know that that number has gotten smaller and smaller. So again, these are some of the publishers of children books on YouTube that are allowing the videos of their books to be read aloud to you. I do also encourage you to look at like subscriptions and what you have for your school district. I know our school district, the state of Pennsylvania, through our Power Library, we have BookFlix and TrueFlix. So we're allowed to use those because we have access to those. I do know there are like Tumblebook that you can also, so if you have a license, a subscription to Tumblebook, you'll be able to use those. And so just kind of thinking about that. And then also Storyline Online is a really great opportunity to be sharing with your students, especially at the elementary level. They really enjoy those videos. So again, just, there are options. I do try to be more positive with my teacher beginning of the year instead of telling them, oh, you really shouldn't be doing a read aloud or you shouldn't be doing this. I send them what we have, like what resources we have in the library and what they can use. We also have Epic that we can use. And again, there are some other free ones. Storyline Online is just one of my favorite ones. And then I'm going to pass it on to Julie, who's going to talk about adding music to your creative content.
Okay. Yes, so we know that music can really enhance all of our creative work. But music is also very tricky. So the easiest solution, obviously, is to use your stock music within your creation tools, such as WeVideo, Adobe Express, Canva, Anchor, etc. One interesting thing about Canva recently is they have added many snippets of popular artists and songs too. So that's been nice to utilize as a teacher. I usually send out a weekly update, little video, minute long or less, just to share what's happening in the library. And I like to look for some music that teachers might recognize too, when I'm trying to just show and highlight what we're doing in the library. There's also many sites for royalty-free music. Some of those are linked right here on the slide, and public domain music as well. So there are options. Just be careful about, adding a whole song from Spotify or one of your playlists to any of your creations, and something really important to help kids understand too. So yeah, next slide. Okay, so why is music so tricky? Well, because there are many copyright owners to even a single song. Here are just a few. Lyricist, composer, publishing company, recording label. So trying to go out and seek permission would be quite an arduous task. So we do need to be careful with just making sure we're considering the fair use factors about if we can include any music at all. Next slide. So a lot of times kids are asked about TikTok, and no matter what we personally feel about TikTok, the reason it's a win-win situation for musicians and their recording labels, because they get to have their song featured, just a short snippet of the song usually, and then they receive some royalties from it. So that is just something to keep in mind when somebody's asking about, well, how come kids can use TikTok to create a video with a Taylor Swift song, and that is why. Also, just remember too that TikTok is complying with their copyright laws because they have these relationships with the recording artists and companies. So again, a win-win situation. Next slide. So is it okay to use just a certain amount of my favorite songs? So I think there used to be some myth that was around that, hey, if I just use 10 to 15 seconds, it's totally considered fair use. That's not necessarily true, because again, you have to go through all 4 factors of that fair use test. So you can obtain permission from the people or the company who own the rights if you want to use your favorite song, or consider how your work is going to be used. So with students, I always do a podcasting unit with the seniors at the end of the year. We just did it, and they wanted to use some of their favorite songs in it. And then we talked about the fair use test and how if they use a small snippet of a song is better than using all of the song. But then we also talked about, like, well, where does the purpose, what is this? Is this going to be in your use in just the educational setting? Or are you going to publish it widely outside where the public can access it? Because we know that teaching and educational purposes are definitely more in favor of that being a fair use situation. But the minute you take that and you publicize it somewhere else and invite the public in, then that fair use situation may change. So having those conversations with both your teachers and your students about how it's going to be used, the audience, is it solely just for the educational purpose on an educational platform, or are you reaching out and posting it on a public website, for example? So when it comes to TikTok, there is an intellectual property policy there that you can link. Personal accounts may freely use any music already in the TikTok library without copyright restrictions, because there's several record labels where they have agreements, like I said earlier, but also business accounts, they only have a commercial music library. And you can see that that is a very limited selection of songs that are not the well-known popular artists, because that's where we're getting into that effect on the market factor of fair use, because it's to sell something. So again, those are all things to consider. Streaming music at school rather than a copyright issue per se, this is more like when Jen was talking about a terms of agreement, when she was going over those definitions. When you sign up for these kinds of music streaming platforms, you are signing an agreement that you're going to be using it for your personal use. So if you're publicly performing it at school or having it at school, then you are getting into the weeds a little bit as far as possibly violating your terms of service that you signed on to when you bought the subscription. So keep that in mind. Memes are pretty fairly untested area of law right now. There is an article linked there that is very interesting to read. Is that the article that is linked, or I don't know, that might just be in my notes. But it's a very untested area of law right now, because I guess mostly you can consider that it is transformative, which is one of the factors of fair use too. And you are adding new meaning, or you're transforming that image in some way to add a new meaning to it than the original purpose. So we're watching to see if any of those cases come, or there are any cases that come forward about using memes. Just know it's a largely untested area right now in law.
And we can go back and link that in the
Yeah,
slides.
Okay,
because
that'd be great.
I don't think it is, but yeah.
Okay, what about your learning management systems? So for example, we use Canvas. Generally, again, when I go back to how in the education world, it is very much a fair use scenario. So if you are posting something for your students and it's in that closed educational platform, however, remember that what is preventing that student or a parent who's an observer in that LMS from sharing that outwardly elsewhere too, the things that you post. So be very, very careful about what you're posting on your Canvas page, and still, or Canvas or Schoology or whatever your school is using. Also, they do have, you'll notice that in this example here with Canvas, there is an attribution feature to where you can share and post your lessons to the Commons, which is a very nice feature. But just remember to pay attention to those, pay attention to what it says, when it's the Creative Commons, when you use somebody else's work from an LMS. Next slide. So what can you add to a password protected learning management system? So books from paid research database where you can embed a permalink, or a website or an article permalink from any of your databases, a copyright expired book from Project Gutenberg, worksheets you have permission from publisher to use. No, please don't have PDF scanned books, which I know teachers have done, like a whole copy of a book that is not in the public domain, and they find it and they are posting it into that LMS. Use of file sharing sites and sharing resources that one teacher acquired legally. That's going back to that teachers pay teachers with the license. Again, a lot of this is just like, good manners, good digital etiquette, and that we as adults need to be models for our students. So it's very important when we can get that message to the kids that or to our teachers and to our buildings, that we do that. It's always best practice if you can link something as opposed to uploading, so it can link to the original source. That is a good idea as well. Okay, I'm turning it over back to Brittany.
All right, so we're just going to look at a few scenarios just to kind of review everything that we've gone over. Here's the first one. Students want to create a video to advertise for prom and use a series of popular songs in the video. This video will be shown in school during student news and will be posted on the Student Council Instagram account. So do you think this would be fair use? And again, you'd have to go through those 4 factors. Why are you using it? How much are you using? Yeah, I'm seeing a whole bunch of no's in the chat. And that is correct. It's no. The biggest part is putting it on Instagram. All right, let's go to the next one. Scenario 2. A high school student in the American pop culture class designs a presentation about the television show Friends. He uses images from Google that are not considered Creative Commons, but only plans to share it within the classroom and cites the images. Is this considered fair use? Which Julie talked a little bit about this when she talked about some of her students. Are you using it just in the education setting? Or are you putting it out in the public? Whole bunch of yeses this time. Yes, that's correct. All right, scenario 3. A third grade teacher would like to reward her students for accomplishing a goal. The students want to watch the Pinocchio movie on Disney+. She agrees to show them only the first 30 minutes of the movie using her account, but not the entire movie. Is this a fair use situation? Ooh, lots of no's. Yeah, this is not fair use. And this also gets into that whole terms of service agreement as well, because she's using Disney+. All right, so the next slides are going to be about infringement versus plagiarism. It's already, sorry, I was reading something in the chat. So this is covered in another presentation, so I'm just going to quickly go over it. There's some scenarios towards the end, so if you get a chance, make sure just kind of go back and look at those different scenarios, but I'm mainly just going to talk about this first slide. So Dana, if you'll go back. So the difference between infringement versus plagiarism, this is confused a lot of times by educators. They're both extremely important when it comes to how and when we use others' work, but it's really also important to know the differences. When you're talking about plagiarism, it's focusing on academic integrity. So it's important that students, but also adults, try not to pass off others' work as their own. To avoid plagiarism, students need to identify copy material, and this is where they're going to cite their sources. But with copyright infringement, it's focusing on, or copyright law focuses on providing incentives for the production of new creative work. It therefore aims to ensure that authors and creators can control their work and get paid if they choose, not just that they receive proper attribution and acknowledgement. So yes, it's great, and it's a great habit to get into citing your sources. However, if it is something when it has to do with copyright law, you have to ask permission. They're separate problems, copyright infringement and plagiarism. There could be some situations, which those scenarios in the next few slides that you can review on your own, where students may cite their source properly, but they're still infringing on someone else's work, and then vice versa, where a student uses the copyrighted work because they asked permission, but then they didn't cite their source, and then it could still be plagiarism. So just make sure you know the difference of the two. All right, next slide. Okay. Try to remember what this one was.
Just that there are lots of examples of famous
yes.
artists about copyright lawsuits. So it's
Yes,
easy to
and this
find something in the news.
This one's also a big one too with Ed Sheeran that just came out. This is, I really think when you get to use real world examples too for staff and students, it really helps them to understand the importance of copyright too. All right, next slide.
Why is it not?
Okay, AI. This one is one that people ask about a lot. AI, is it a potential infringement? Well, right now, no. But stay tuned. Make sure you check the Copyright Office because they're constantly looking at things. But here's right now why it's not a copyright issue. You've got the monkey selfie case, and that's kind of what the Copyright Office is looking at right now. So in the monkey selfie case, you had a photographer who pretty much taught these monkeys how to take selfies. They learned how to use the shutter on the camera. And he used them for something later. He was doing some kind of art piece with it. And someone came out and said, wait a minute, you do not own that copyright. The monkeys own the copyright. Well, the courts came out and said, no, monkeys can't own copyright. They're not humans. So that's where it's at with AI right now. But again, just make sure you're checking that copyright.gov to see where the cases go from there. I do know maybe last spring there was a library journal that came out and it was all about AI. And one of the articles in there was talking about the lawsuits for copyright, but it had to do with the chat bots and how the companies were scanning their work in to train the chatbot. So it wasn't so much about like an individual creating something with ChatGPT. It was more on the training side of it. So that's just something else to be aware of as well. All right, so let's go to the website. And if you haven't been to the website is fantastic.
There we go.
Okay, with the website, you do want to make sure that you're signed in, and Dana's signed in. You can kind of see at the top of her screen, and that is just for our grant purposes. It's a super easy sign in. You don't have to have a password. It's just your email. Several people have asked, and Dana did say at the very beginning, we will be recorded, but several people asked about the recording, and she'll show you where that's at. She's going to go to office hours and webinars. And right here is where, when it is recording, when the recording's ready, that's where it will be posted. So that's our one from January. And so the other one, it will take a little bit to get up there, but once it's ready, you'll find it on this page. We also hold office hours. All three of us take turns. You can pop in at any of those times and dates. If you have any kind of questions, we're there to just kind of talk you through some things. Again, we can't give you legal advice, but we're there to kind of help you out.
And then our escape rooms, a couple of different ways to access them, but you can do it from the pop-up, or if you close the pop-up, you can go to any of the grade levels, elementary, middle, or high school. We'll just choose middle school. And you can see that they're linked here. So if I close this pop-up, I can't get the pop-up back for 24 hours, but here's, excuse me, escape room activities. Also located at the bottom are the escape room activities. And then there are one set of activities for each of the middle school lessons. So 4 middle school lessons. Here's a facilitator guide that gives you, and we're going to come up with tips and additional tips and tricks. So how your students would solve the escape rooms, but then here are the escape room activities. And the important thing to know is this is a Google site, but you do not need to log in. In fact, we recommend you don't log in to a Google account. You just respond and put your responses in here. So click out of that. And if you're not familiar, again, we have elementary lessons, 1 lesson per grade at the elementary, and the escape rooms are actually accessible on this page. The nice thing about the grade K through 3 is there's no narration, so kids get to watch and retell the story. And it's also good for upper grades or English language learners or foreign language students to actually go and retell the story in a language. And then high school, there's 3 lessons. Again, using copyrighted works in our own creations, that's a really good one for students because it goes through, it has videos. We have our lesson PDF, also lesson slides. So everything's done.
Yeah, and that's for all of the grade level bands. Those lesson slides are great.
So with notes to the teacher, yeah. And then, and everything's in Google. So if you're a Google district, all the files are accessible and you can download any of the lessons, the PDF, any of the any of our artifacts there.
And the PDFs are also really great if you have an educator who's really nervous about teaching copyright. I know that's something that I've worked with several of our staff members, and it helps them with questions that they can ask the students during discussions. And it's got some extra activities in there.
Yeah,
So
that's great. And again, like Brittany said, the more you teach the course, the more knowledgeable you become and the less dependent you become. We have our infographics here as well. And again, access to our resources. And then PD, if teachers are interested in having a more in-depth, we have a free Canvas course. You do not have to be a Canvas district to participate. It's self-paced. It says 2 to 3 hours. It's definitely more on the 2-hour end, but it goes and it gives really good examples and also in-depth experience. And then for anybody who's in the Ludo district, this is a paid subscription, but we have a version of our Canvas course in a Ludo.
And Julie, Jen, and I did the professional development too. It was really helpful, especially starting out.
Yeah, and then some non-CNC resources here as well. So, okay, so I'm going to jump back into the presentation. Oops. I can get to the right. Go back to the right. Okay, so here we are. Okay, so yeah, so slides 54 and 57, again, were things that have been discussed in previous recordings, so you can access those. Ways to tie in copyright instruction. I'm not sure who's doing that.
This was mine.
Oh, okay.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Oh yeah, we're
we're right at the end here. So just look through these slides at your own time. Again, if you didn't get the bit.ly, we'll drop it back in the chat one more time. Also, this recording will be sent to everybody who registered. But these are just some ways in the past. I've also been an elementary librarian, a middle school librarian, yes, and high school. So all 3 levels. And these are some ideas of ways I snuck copyright instruction in to what I was already teaching, because kids are creating all the time anyway. So you are welcome to explore any of those ideas. And then Jen was going to share, she right there has some actual quotes from students about how they feel about the curriculum and the lessons. And those are interesting to read through as well. We've been getting a lot of questions on the chat, some good questions. I've tried to answer them the best I can. Are there any other questions?
So yeah, as I said, we'll post the recording. Anyone who's registered will receive an email, but you can anticipate that about next week, this time the recording should be available. So. And we
right, and then also office hours. I know we mentioned office hours, but please check out our office hours, because we have some more coming up in June, then we're off in July, and then we'll start right back up in August again. So at different times during 3 weeks, a 3-week window there. So please check if you get some questions, like some of these great questions I'm seeing in the chat. If you just want to talk through them more at length with us, we would love to have you join us.
And if you'd like a certificate for PD for attending today, or if you have colleagues who watch the recording and want to get PD credit, just email me at dan@copyrightandcreativity.org, and I will create a certificate, PD certificate for you. We can do a similar training or trainings of this type virtually for your district. We're not doing so much in person at the moment, but you can always email me again, and we can figure out a time and place to do a virtual training. We'll try and match you up with one, two or three of our excellent ambassadors, and kind of trying to address situations that you're seeing in your district. So we'll try and tailor the presentation a little bit for you, again, without giving legal advice, but just pointing out resources and trying to make make you more valuable to your teachers and make them understand copyright and fair use better so that they can be, again, excellent role models and provide information in the chat box. Jen, do you want to do that? But it's dan@copyrightandcreativity.org. So we'll type that in. You can also go to info at Copyright and Creativity on our website, and the email will get to me. So there's multiple ways to get to me. Also, if you on the recording, the Zoom recording, I think it has me at greenspan.dana@gmail. So again, and as Brittany said, there is no cost to districts for our trainings, just the time of your teachers. So thank you, everyone. I'm sure you saw what great educators Julie, Jen, and Brittany are. And again, they're on our office hours. So we appreciate, if you want to talk to them and kind of pick their brains some more, they're available to you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. And yeah, hope you can join us again. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.